What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York and calling on Zoom. We are here with Jason of Becoming the Archetype. Thanks for being here today, man. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, man, stoked to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, anytime, anytime. I was just listening to the brand new album, Children of the Great Extinction. This is an epic album, and I'm very excited for the rest of the world to hear it. For people who didn't hear the whole album yet, could the first three singles that we released, The Lost Colony, The Remnant, and The Calling, serve as a good representation of what this entire album is going to sound like, or is that just scratching the surface for this?
I think it's a little bit of both. When we picked those songs in order because it's a concept album. We kind of wanted people to get a feel for the fact that it tells a continuous story. But as with anything that Becoming the Archetype has done, there's a lot of variety between the tracks. So the later tracks in the record don't necessarily sound exactly like the earlier ones. And yeah, so I mean, I think it's a good representation. This record has a lot of variance, though. So yeah.
Okay, and being that it's been quite a while since the last Becoming the Archetype album, is it at any way connected in this concept, which we'll get into in a second, but is this concept at all connected to your previous album, Celestial Completion, or is this kind of like its own entity in a way, being that it is the first album in quite a while?
Yeah, this is its own thing. Before COVID, I sort of wrote these lyrics. It's the first record that we've ever done where I wrote the lyrics before the music. So the concept was there as like a graphic novel type of concept, and then I was like, okay, well, let's make this into an album, and maybe one day it'll be a graphic novel. Who knows?
I love it when artists do that when they make a graphic novel to go like whether it would be like Guar or My Chemical Romance or any of these graphic novel bands. It almost seems like it's a type of merch now that a lot of people enjoy getting into.
Totally. I'm a big Coheed and Cambria guy, so
Oh hell
big
yeah!
influence on me.
Yep, they're from my county growing up, so represent.
Oh, sick.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. I actually met one of their former teachers at Claudio's school, and he actually still like has like a picture that he doodled of him like in his drawer that he kept. So it's probably
That's
worth
so awesome.
it's probably worth some money now.
Yeah.
You- And you mentioned that you wrote a lot of the lyrics before the making of this album. Was with the lyrics? I mean, being that you wrote a lot of these lyrics first, did this also determine the outcome of the music as well? Did it alter the instrumentation in a way as well, or instrumentally, it does carry the sort of similar sound that we got in the previous Becoming the Archetype albums?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so because a lot of the music was written independently of the lyrics. So I sort of had the brainchild of the lyrics, but then Seth, our guitar player, keyboard player, he wrote a lot of the riffs and stuff totally, in the dark, not knowing what the lyrical concept was. But then I love going back and sort of retconning things to make them, bring them up to so it's all sort of cohesive with the theme. So we definitely brought it all together in the end to feel very sci-fi and epic and all of those kinds of themes that fit the lyrics.
And being that this or well, first I should ask actually, were you worried that being that you wrote a lot of lyrics first that like they would always be like one syllable over or under like the actual
Yeah.
arrangements of every song?
Yeah, well, so that's always, not only is that one of the challenges of writing the lyrics first, but that's one of the challenges of writing any lyrics that are supposed to tell a story, is you run into like, well, what if I can't say what I want to say without it sounding really lame in a song, I think prog music in general suffers from that problem where it's difficult to figure out how to make it fit in a way that sounds like a good song. So hopefully I struck a good balance. I mean, there's definitely some like moments where I'm curious if people will pick up on some of the really silly, like science fiction-y sounding lyrics that I threw in there. But, I'm mostly screaming and growling and doing death metal vocals. So hopefully it works.
Well, did you write these songs chronologically? Like, was the Dead World the first song and the Lost Colony the second one? Because I was wondering, being that this is a concept album, why you chose to release the second, third, and fourth song first, as opposed to the first song on the album.
Yeah, we talked about releasing the first three songs, but that fourth track, which is called "The Calling," our most recent single, it just really was a song that meant a whole lot to us. It really sort of captures, I feel like, a little bit of the uniqueness of what the band does. There's some piano, like a piano break, and things like that. And that's sort of part of what Becoming the Archetype was. It's like a little mixture between a little bit of black metal, a little bit of melodic metal, and other things. So I feel like for a lot of us, The Dead World may be even stronger than some of the singles. That opening track that you mentioned, it's one of the strongest tracks on the record. So I'm hoping that when people check out the record when it comes out, they'll just be like, holy crap, like where was this song? And it'll make the rounds. So.
Well, is being that it is a concept album, I'd imagine that it's not like there's some albums that I call shuffle friendly where you can, pick a song and listen to it in any order. But for a listener to get the full experience of Children of the Great Extinction, it's meant to open up with the Dead World and end with the Sacrament, right?
Totally. But I will also say that we wanted each song to be, independently listenable. It just won't necessarily make a whole lot of lyrical continuity sense, but yeah, I mean, this time around we were just like, well, we've written songs before, concept songs before, where if you listen to one and you don't listen to the other one, it sort of ends abruptly and you don't know what's happening. We didn't want to do that this time, so every song has its own little vignette, I guess is the way to say it.
Yeah, I mean, because when I listen to this album, like, I think it has the same momentum and the same, oomph as, your previous albums. So, like, you could almost, like, listen to this. I feel like each song works very well together, but also individually as well.
Totally. That's what I would hope. I mean, we talked about that even when we started writing this record, which was, that was probably the biggest challenge, was figuring out where do you start when it's been 10 years and you've got fans that want a record, but like, how do you make it sound like your old records, but not sound old, And so we tried to do something that feels like it would fit at any point in our career, but also takes our career a little bit to the next step. So that's what we're shooting for.
When it comes to having a concept that you want to address in an album, are you mainly looking, like with the Children of the Great Extinction, that definitely is a very, I really think of many different ideas that could come into this. Were you looking at other mediums of art, whether it be literature or visual art or even other music? Were you looking at other artistic mediums for the influence of this album? Or is there maybe a lot of your personal life also invested in this lyrically as well?
I mean, there's definitely a lot of the influences that I've been into as far as science fiction stuff over the years. That's always been a big part of becoming the Archetype. I always really drew a lot on that and some other Stephen King, Dark Tower series influences. And I had just recently reread the book Dune before the movie came out back in 2020, when I think they originally had the movie slated to come out. So I was just on a big sci-fi kick, and I was like, man, I really want to create our own story here, not just a bunch of standalone songs, but like, a full story. This is that kind of band, so let's go for it.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people, I think I probably asked every person I've interviewed since like the pandemic happened, how did the pandemic influence your songwriting for this album? But like, being that life really did feel like a science fiction film, not even just from the pandemic, but all the constant anxiety and everything that came with it, and the division and stuff like that. It almost seemed like that out of all the times for becoming an Archetype to release an album, this is like the best time.
Yeah, I mean, it all worked together. At first, it delayed us. We actually started working on the record before COVID, and then kind of got like shocked to the system, and we just kind of put it all on hold. But then when we came back around and started really cranking on the songwriting, the pandemic actually kind of helped. I don't know if any other bands have said similar, but it was like all of a sudden I was like, okay, well, I've got time. I've got time to write a ton of epic stuff. My side job is as a school teacher. Well, I wasn't in the classroom, so it was like, why don't I just pour all this time into writing? So I feel like this record got actually a ton of extra attention that it wouldn't have gotten in a normal year, if that makes any sense.
What did the idea of this album, of what you wanted this album to be, like, stay? Did you keep the same idea from when you started writing this in 2020, or did like it evolve and change a lot over time?
No, it didn't actually change a ton over time. The idea stayed pretty well intact, but musically it evolved a ton. I would say, we had a ton of time to put into making sure all the riffs and all the, orchestration and everything was what we wanted it to be, which I don't always feel like we had a chance to do with all of our previous records. But our very first record, of course, we wrote when we were all like teenagers. So we kind of wanted to recapture that and not rush the thing. So, I mean, with this record, we spent well over a year working on writing and recording and, picking apart the little details. So.
Well, because you also like, it's funny too, because I believe that this year is sort of like a big year for Becoming the Archetype in a way, because in 2020 it was 15 years of Terminate Damnation, the debut of
Totally.
Becoming the Archetype. And before you know it, like time, the number one thing the pandemic taught me is that time flies whether you're having fun or not.
That's true.
But when you look at every album that you made, whether it be a concept album or not, do you think that maybe the concept or the meaning of a song or an album could evolve with you over time, or do you prefer that if every album kind of is like a representation or a snapshot of who you were at that particular time?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think it's a little bit of both. When I look back at the experience of the record, I definitely think it evolves over time. I mean, in particular, that we did a record with Devin Townsend in 2008, and that experience has just unfolded over the years so much to me that it's like I couldn't even. I took so much for granted, and it was such a great experience. I've learned so much as an artist. And the very first record we did that you mentioned, Terminate Damnation, I mean, we were just kids. We didn't know what was going on. And we were recording in Seattle. It was the first record we'd ever done. And like halfway through the record, the producer just kind of stopped coming to the studio, which was super weird. And like, I mean, there were so many crazy experiences that now when I look back, I guess what I'm saying is I can see them differently. But I guess musically and lyrically, when I look back, yeah, it definitely feels like a still shot of like, that's where I was at, artistically, musically at the time, which is why I'm so excited about this new record, because I feel like I'm able to sort of see all of that. I don't want to be like one of those, like, like Man of War only listens to Man of War kind of people, but like we listen to a ton of our old stuff, it was like, hey, well, what do we sound like? And what do people think we sound like? Not just what do we like from other bands, which we obviously pulled in, but how can we be us,
Yeah. And sci-fi is a concept that's been addressed in all genres of music, whether it would be
Totally.
like, I mean, Fear Factory, I think, is very well known for how they've done it, but you've had so many other like sci-fi oriented bands. There's a band from Germany called Cybercore that's really epic in that. What is it like when it came to this sort of sci-fi theme? Because I know that you are in a lot of other projects as well, and you've been involved in a lot of other projects. Is the sci-fi thing, does this relate to you like on a personal level? Is it almost kind of like an external metaphor of who you personally are? Or has like this sort of sci-fi theme just always been kind of like a fantasy as a means of escape for you?
I think for me, the reason I like it is because it gives a little bit of a metaphoric veneer, but it's all very possible. It just seems slightly out of reach. So I think that's, to me, you can tackle a lot of existential, quandaries and dilemmas. And this record is totally about, existential angst and stress and frustrations and, hope for the future and stress about the future and all sorts of things. But all packaged in a format that doesn't sound like, it doesn't sound like it's stuck in 2022, which I guess is why I like the sci-fi stuff so much. I mean, fantasy is really cool as well, but I tend to favor sci-fi over like, Lord of the Rings style fantasy stuff or whatever, unless we're talking about board games, and then I tend to favor the fantasy stuff.
When it comes to,
I'm a big board game geek.
I'm a big video game freak, so anything Legend of Zelda, I'll always pick over any
Oh, yeah,
sci-fi
for
game.
sure.
I'll pick Zelda over Halo any day of the week.
It's been 5 years, man. We need another Zelda platformer.
I got
Big one.
I got Zelda Breath of the Wild right when we went into lockdown. It couldn't have been more of an a more appropriate time. It was like I never had the time to get it when it came out in 2017, and then I finally had the time to get it in 2020, and I was like, yep, I couldn't have gotten it at a better time.
Awesome.
And obviously, when Becoming the Archetype, if you were to play like a live show, you have to bring in material from all different albums ranging in your catalog. So when you're like mixing different songs together from different times in a set list, do you think that almost brings another layer of context or maybe a different type of meaning to the album or to the live set as well, into the song?
100%. And I mean, when we sort of thought along those lines when we were writing new songs too, it was like, okay, well, not necessarily how can we copy what we've done in the past, note for note, but if we were to pick like, 5 or 6 things that people sort of, it's almost like they remember these moments that we've created, how can we make sure that we recreate those types of moments? And so we're definitely looking forward to the opportunity to play some shows and stuff. And we've had these conversations about what will the set list be like. And, that's a hard question for a band that has 6 albums now. It's like, man, if we get a 30-minute set on a festival or something like that, how are we going to distill our whole catalog down into like 5 songs? Because we also don't really have songs for the most part that are under like 5 or 6 minutes long.
Yeah,
so,
I know. Like you could, if you have,
we have some that are like 12 minutes long. So
you could do what Between the Buried and Me. They were doing a tour one time, and like their set was like they were opening for Lamb of God, I believe, and their set was like automatically like cut short anyway. So they just played only had a 20-minute set, and they had a 20-minute song. So they just played that one song. So you may work out for the best.
Yeah, I guess I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, we'll just string a couple of the long 12-minute ones together.
And now I actually made a mistake earlier in this interview, because I Am was the last Becoming the Archetype
Correct.
album, not Celestial Completion, my bad. But being that this is
Celestial Completion is the last one I was on, so
okay.
I wasn't offended by that. I left the band after Celestial Completion as the vocalist and bass player, so they brought in a new vocalist and bass player for I Am.
And what I was going to ask is, if you don't mind, if you were to like play songs off of that album, would you have a different attachment to it as opposed to stuff off of Celestial Completion?
So I actually had a little bit of an involvement in that record, in that I helped them with the lyrics and the theme of the record. And I was a big fan of that record. I mean, people might be surprised to hear that, but I thought it was great. When I left the band, it wasn't on any like contentious grounds. My wife and I were about to have our first child. It was like, okay, well, I can't be touring right now. So yeah, I mean, I was a big fan of that record. I think it'd be cool to play some songs from it if we can fit that in. It just also, like we said, if we get a 20 or 30-minute set, people want to hear the hits, I guess. So we'll probably just play something from the first record, a few from the third record, and we'll see where we're at. Maybe we'll let fans vote on what they want to hear.
Now, I'm definitely going to maybe make you feel very old now, but just going into your experience, as a musician, you've been doing this for a while outside of Becoming the Archetype, but this is 20 years of the first demo of Non-Existent Failure. Can you just take me back to that time period? Take me back to when I was 8 years old and you were working on this.
Oh my Lord. Now, okay, that last part is where you stuck the knife in and twisted it.
I had to.
Before that, we were doing good. Yeah, I didn't know it's been 20 years, but you're right. And yeah, man, I think the full story of Becoming the Archetype, even to this day, can probably be summed up in the sense of like, we just didn't know what we were doing. We're just awkward kids who liked music. And I got into this sort of by accident. Like, had friends who had a band in their basement, and I would hang out with them, and then their vocalist quit, and I was like, well, I can try to do vocals. And then their bass player quit, and I was like, well, I can try to do bass. And and then we cut a demo and started trying to play some gigs, and those were super awkward and weird, and we didn't know what kind of clothes to wear, and we didn't know what kind of, like, we didn't know how to act. I'm pretty sure like the first photo we ever took, I was wearing like pleated khaki pants and a cardigan sweater. And just like, we didn't know what was going on. Like, we played a I think the first concert I remember playing was at a battle of the bands at a high school. And we played a Zayo cover song. We played Skin Like Winter from Zayo, and scared everyone to death at the school. And we lost to some band that played a Beastie Boys song. fight for the right to party, but I mean, which totally should win. Um, but yeah, I mean, and fast forward 20 years, and it's still we're just like we're a little bit awkward as a band and as guys, but like we've just always been sort of a music and art kind of band. You know what I mean?
Definitely, definitely. Because I think that there is like, I'm not like trying to like, I'm not going to blow smoke by any means, but when I listen to this sort of like progressive, sort of like, real heavy sound that you guys had, I really think you were foreseeing, like, I don't want to call it a trend because I feel like that's always such a negative way, but like, I think becoming the Archetype really did foresee what we're seeing now in the world of like aggressive music. Think about how many like progressive like death metal bands, whether it be Rivers of Nile or The Contortionist or Archspire or Shadow of Intent, like a lot of these bands have been, really, it's almost been kind of like a new movement in a way. And I almost feel like I almost feel like In Loving Memory of Everything I Never Had almost was kind of like a premonition of that.
Yeah, and I also think a lot of the way you put it like that, I think there's a lot of bands who, the genres have intermingled so much now. It's not necessarily just one, like hardcore. It's hard to determine if you call a band hardcore or metalcore. I see people arguing about that kind of stuff all the time with a band like Knock Loose or something. It's like, are they metalcore or are they hardcore? And there were definitely phases in the 2000s where like emo was popular, and then like deathcore was popular, crabcore was popular. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I feel like sort of now we've kind of almost come out of that, and people are just come around to like a really good gumbo almost of metal. You know what I mean? And I feel like we were trying to be that, but we were always the awkward kid who like wasn't hardcore enough for the hardcore fans, and we weren't metal enough for the death metal fans. You know what I mean? We weren't brutal enough for the uber brutal people. But now hopefully people will, check this record out. It's got a little bit of everything.
Oh man, well you guys are way better than that whole. I will call this a trend, but when people were saying a word and just adding core at the end of it, and it was all of a sudden a new genre. There's a genre called Nintendo core. Like if you just go on like
Totally.
You could go on Wikipedia and Google these genres, and there's like 2 bands that define the whole genre. So like that to me is one of the funnier aspects, but. You mentioned that you are prog metal, and I also think that prog metal has also, too, in itself become its own line of experiments because Dream Theater is considered prog, Opeth is considered prog, Devin Townsend is considered prog, and then you have Obscura, who's considered prog as well.
Right.
All of these bands sound different. So to you, what is there like a key element that all prog bands have to have, aside from songs that are 27 and a half minutes?
Yeah, see, I think that's what you're getting at is what's cool about it. I think prog, like Devin Townsend's got a lot of stuff now that's considered prog, but it's like it's not that different sonically from what he was doing in the early 90s with his music. But now it's sort of like I think people are understanding there's like an artistic approach that is prog. So I would even say a band like Muse is kind of a prog band, even though they're like a radio arena rock band. They sort of like a prog approach to what they do. They're trying to create like a story. They're trying to create an atmosphere. And I think that's sort of what makes it prog. I mean, BTA has never been and never will be the shreddiest band in the world. And we don't necessarily have all the most technical stuff going on, but our approach I think comes from that same place. And maybe that's, maybe it's a little bit of being a music snob. I don't know, Dream Theater dudes all went to music school, and most of the guys in Becoming the Archetype went to music school, and that's where we met actually. So
yeah, well, I mean, I've always thought that prog, when it comes to concept albums, prog takes the crown in addressing that.
Of course.
Like when you look at Steven Wilson's Hand Cannot Erase, when you look, and even
oh my gosh, yeah,
yeah, and even I know people don't like this album. I think it's a masterpiece, but The Astonishing by Dream Theater, unpopular opinion, but like. Just the way, and when I was interviewing them, they told me they were like leaving notes like on how they were making this album. It almost seems like when it comes to prog metal, you're able to go outside and address so many things outside of the music without necessarily having to rely on a gimmick.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think the greatest achievement of it, or at least the greatest facet of it for me, is that you can you can take the listener on a journey somewhere else with you, and I think that's what music's supposed to do. But some music's meant to be experienced for the aggression live. A lot of metal music is like that, but I think with prog, especially prog metal, it sort of gives you a taste of like almost the whole musical universe in one package, which is what I like about it. And it's why I tend to be like, I'm a huge Devin Townsend fan. I love everything he does. Obviously, I mentioned his name like 3 times in this, but and the new Opeth stuff is really cool. We listened to a ton of that when we were doing this record. It was Opeth and Gojira and Devin Townsend and I'm a huge Dream Theater fan as well. I won't say that The Astonishing was my favorite thing, but I do like the newest record they put out. I'm a hardcore Scenes from a Memory guy. It's like, that shows my age probably again, but I'm like, Scenes from a Memory is like, to me, actually, when I say it shows my age, I think it actually literally pinpoints my age, because I do love the first few records, right? But I'm not like 50 something. I'm in my late 30s. So like for me, they really hit it to me when Jordan Rudess jumped in.
No, and that's awesome.
And it was just perfect.
I'll always go for 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. That's my favorite Dream Theater album.
I love that one too. I'm a 6 Degrees guy too.
Yeah, I was just saying.
But then there's not much heavier than Train of Thought. The guitar tones and stuff are crazy heavy.
Of course. Anyway. Yeah, but like 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence is my favorite. Again, The Astonishing isn't my favorite. I just think it's incredibly overhated. That's all.
I'll agree with you there. We can agree that it's overhated.
Yeah, like there's plenty of albums that are even more disappointing than that one. But like, it's funny you mentioned that too, and I know it's like very cliche to say like, what are your influences? But every prog fan I've met, Blackwater Park wasn't their first album. You know what I mean? Or right. They didn't grow up with Porcupine Tree or any of those bands. So like, was there kind of like a gateway into prog as well? Because I noticed like a lot of people who were very much into metalcore because of the melody gravitated more towards prog because of that same aspect as well, because of the way it was able to use like orchestration and keyboards and stuff.
Yeah, this is a side note to what you just said, but then I'll go back to the influences thing. I think the advent of deathcore becoming a huge deal was what pushed some people over into the prog more, because Between the Buried and Me sort of had a little bit of that deathcore thing going on, and I think they rebelled against that, and we're like, you know what? No, we don't want to. We're not here just for huge breakdowns and blast beats. We're here to make music that's crazy interesting. And I'm not insulting the breakdowns and blast beats. I love that stuff. I'm just saying, I think it's sort of like it divided. It forced some people, like you said, to go over and be like, okay, I really prefer the melodies, and I really prefer metal. Like when I got into metal, I got into it from a classical music sort of background. I was doing like choir stuff. I was listening to some classical music. I was in music school studying guitar, and like when I got into that stuff, to me, I liked it because these are the virtuosos of their instruments. Like these people are the best at what they're doing. I wasn't like angry at my parents or angry at God or anything like that. I need to go listen to music with distortion because I'm mad. It was just, I thought it was beautiful. So like, that's what pulled me into that kind of stuff. But the bands I think that really got us into prog, if there was a gateway, was probably like Metallica, Megadeth, for a couple of us for sure. And then I got into Dream Theater from there, because I don't think it's a huge leap.
Yeah, no, definitely
from thrash, melodic thrash metal, and rock over into like Dream Theater. And then Dream Theater is sort of a gateway to get further into, some other bands. I really got into Symphony X for a long time.
Oh yeah, they're epic.
Huge fan of Symphony X.
They're incredible.
So, yeah, they need a new record. Also, sort of them and Zelda need to start putting stuff out a little quicker than every 5 years.
I couldn't agree with you more, man. But there's so many like prog bands that really do like put off the album. Hey, we had to wait 13 years for a new Tool album, so.
That's true.
Yep.
That's true.
one of my favorite concert memories was seeing A Perfect Circle, and Maynard said, "We're gonna have a new A Perfect Circle album," and you pretty much heard the whole audience harmonize. When's the new Tool album coming out?
Yeah, that was just like a meme basically for so long.
I know
that it wasn't going to happen. We're going to wait 10,000 years for it.
10,000 days.
Yeah.
But I have a few more questions for you if you have time.
Yeah.
But this is probably the most difficult question of the whole interview, but it's my favorite question to ask anybody because it always stumps everybody. How do you know when you are finished with a song?
The answer is you're finished. I know I'm finished with the song when I have to be finished with the song. Like I reach a certain point where I'm like, okay, if I keep going with this, I'm going to make it worse. So it's like, I am obsessive compulsive about songs. I will work on one song and I'll listen to it 100,000 times. But I have developed, I guess, a little bit of a gauge for when I'm like, okay, this is as good as this. This is where this song needs to be. And even if I could maybe try to make something a little bit better, I've got to step away from it because I don't want to ruin the energy of what it is. I don't want it to come out and be sterile. So, and man, that's hard. I mean, you're right. That is a tough question that would stump everybody. It's like, I mean, I know artists who've gone back and re-recorded songs, from 20 years ago, and they've done new versions because they're like, well, that song wasn't done yet, really. But I'm not that way. I have developed this, like, I don't know if it's a superpower that I have, but like, okay, that song's done. And maybe it's a curse. Maybe I don't get to enjoy the song as much as some of those other people.
Yeah, well, I'm waiting to see one musician who has a career where they just make one song and every album is just the same song, but the radio edition, the abridged version, the demo version, like just do all that.
They definitely need to be one of those bands that has that the band name and the song name and the album name are all the same.
Yep.
If they're going to do that, we definitely need that.
Absolutely.
And then it could just be like they could just add 2 and 3 and 4 to each for each album.
An artist like that is a music journalist's worst nightmare because I have to interview them more than once. What the hell am I going to ask them?
Yeah, seriously.
Yep. And
this song that you already did.
Yeah.
4 times before this.
Oh my God. And I love that's why I love interviewing people about reissues and stuff like that.
Totally.
In order to get like that inspiration, that drive to create, to make that impulse sort of come to fruition, do you almost need to like be in a certain place at a certain time in order for ideas to come through? Or do ideas just usually strike when you least expect it?
Definitely the latter. I do like to get away and get into the studio to get out of the headspace of just like normal quote unquote life. When we wrote the record with Devin Townsend that I keep mentioning, we traveled up to off the coast of Vancouver with him, and we were there. And when we got there, he was like, "Okay, so are you guys ready to play all these songs for me?" And we were like, "I mean, maybe." And he was like, "Okay, well, you're not ready." And he put us in a room at the studio that was like one of the most beautiful places. And he just like left us in there for like a week to rehearse and play the songs. And what was cool about that is that, yeah, the songs were already written, but I feel like we rewrote a lot of things and made them better because we were in a better space to do it. But at the same time, I have literally had vocal ideas, lyric ideas come to me the day I'm in the vocal booth. Or driving to the studio, I'll have the idea that last day. And there's times I'm stressing, and I'll just wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, oh, that's it. I've got it. And I have to like walk out into the living room and record a voice memo in the middle of the night on my phone. And my wife's like, what in the world are you doing? Why are you singing or talking to yourself? And I'm like, if I go back to sleep, this idea is gone forever. So
yeah,
the power of the subconscious.
I've always said that when an artist dies, they go to the realm of forgotten ideas, where every idea that came through them and just disappeared, they're surrounded by all that. So.
Oh man, I'm scared to death of that place. I've had some wacky ideas.
Well,
But
well,
yeah, some of them. I mean, but some of them, I'm like, oh man. I feel like I had one of those the other night, and I had an idea, and then I just couldn't remember it, and I was like, crap. It felt really good, whatever that idea was. So it might be cool to rediscover those.
definitely, definitely. And the final question I wanted to ask you is probably the least deep question I've asked this whole interview. Save the most typical question for last. But now first off, it's so great to have you back and Becoming the Archetype, and I'm really happy that we're finally getting a new Becoming the Archetype album. I know being that you had to being that this is your first Becoming the Archetype album in over a decade and stuff. Could you see yourself in the band maybe putting out music to the same pace as when you put out Terminate Damnation to the Physics of Fire to the album you did with Devin Townsend, or
Dichotomy? Yes.
Dichotomy. Sorry,
Yes.
Dyslexia. But is
Hey,
there?
it's all right.
But is there just can you see yourself maybe recording albums and making more albums more frequently before, or are you going to keep every new Becoming the Archetype album in the future more like an event?
I feel like that's a little bit of a trick question, because the way you said that at the end sounds really good. Like, make it a big event, especially with the way the music industry is nowadays. It's hard to just be, to just come in with a new song and it fly under the radar. But, I mean, it's still early. This is the record is just brand new. But we've already talked about, how much fun we had doing the record, and how we still feel like there's probably more in the tank, artistically, creatively. So yeah, I wouldn't rule out that we'll do more. It's just a question of, I don't know the answer as to whether or not it would be on a regular album cycle, or maybe on a more of an event. I do think this is more of an event kind of band. Maybe this record can become a little bit of a, like I mentioned earlier, can become a little bit of a cult classic, and maybe it turns into a graphic novel. And then maybe that can set the groundwork for, a follow-up thematic record. And maybe, that's something artistically, as a prog fan, that really appeals to me, is like, how could we sort of even make this more grandiose and more epic and extend it?
Absolutely. I've always said, I mean, it's probably, I'd imagine the reason why it doesn't happen is because of money, but like, I've always said that it would be really cool if, like, especially with you guys having the sci-fi theme, that like maybe you would do like an animation or something like that. Maybe like an animated movie, even if it's only like a 20-30 minute long thing. Like feel like that would be so cool.
Yeah. No, man. Did you? This is getting a little off track, but because it's not necessarily metal, but actually I think it kind of has a cool metal vibe. Did you ever listen to that Sturgill Simpson record he did a couple years ago?
No.
Where he had the Netflix anime that went with it?
No, I didn't see that.
You need to look that up, and I'm trying to remember the name of the record, but it's he did a record that was like, it's not he's like a country guy.
Okay.
But he did a record that's like, it's got a super like alternative, like dark. It's almost like if ZZ Top and Nine Inch Nails had a baby. It's pretty cool. Wow. But he had a whole anime on Netflix that went along with it, and he got like all the best like old school anime dudes to do the video, or like the movie. It's really cool.
That sounds awesome. I never thought in a million years, like, country and anime. Like, I've never thought I would see that combination. Like, that's like death metal and like Adele like working together. I'm like, that's
the album's called Sound and Fury.
Sound and Fury.
Listen, I mean, he doesn't need my promotion. He doesn't need me promoting him. And the people listening to this may not be into that, but I would say it threw me for a loop when I heard it. I had a music producer friend show it to me. I was like, dude, this is crazy. And it turned out to be like my favorite record that year. And the anime was super sick. So yeah, I would love to do something like that.
I will definitely check that out. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for an amazing conversation, and I'm really looking forward to the viewers hearing this. Is there just anything else with Becoming the Archetype that you would like to promote? Do you have any shows in the works now for this new album, or just anything else you'd like to plug?
We've got a few things we're talking about, but nothing on the calendar yet, so I can't plug them yet. But yeah, I mean, we're hoping to get out there and play some shows, and we're hoping to, get the whole merchandise organism up and running again. So we're hoping to give people some things that, I mean, the artwork by Dan Seagrave is super awesome. And, we want to get that on some shirts and some posters and stuff for people. So
Definitely. I would love to see that. I would love to see the album artwork as like a giant painting too. Like the first, when I looked at that painting,
he's the best, man. His stuff that he's done for Rivers of Neil and it's cool. I think it's kind of cool to see some of the other current metal bands having Dan Seagrave art. You know what I mean? Not that they always didn't, because when when he did our first record, album art, there were tons of bands that used him, but I feel like they were all like super underground, like, just like super brutal bands that you had to be really into the niche to understand. Whereas like now, like the Devil Wears Prada had him do a record cover a couple albums ago, and and Rivers of Neil he's done a couple of theirs, I believe.
Yeah, no, I think he did.
He did the work. I know he did that one. I think he did the one before.
Yeah, I think he did
maybe
Owls
not
as well. But that's another thing. I should have mentioned that before, but I think prog bands also have the best album artwork, whether you're looking at Opeth or Neoblivis. You ever listen to Neobliviscaris?
Yes, for sure.
Oh my God, Obscura, their album artwork,
Obscura's
Archspire,
got killer.
like just all these bands have incredible artwork. They need to make like an exhibition of that.
Man, you're onto something. That would actually be a really cool idea for someone to host like a death metal art exhibition or even a tour.
There's enough artists to do it, so
totally.
Maybe one day
play some of the music, as you go around and check it all out.
Or maybe connect like a pair of headphones next to the painting, and then when you listen to that.
Now you're talking. Yeah.
Hell yeah. But
I like that.
But thank you so much, everybody. We are here with Becoming the Archetype, Children of the Great Extinction, coming out August 26th. Be sure to pick that up. We will see you next time on Heavy New York. Dude, that was perfect. I just want to tell you that right now. I don't care if it's not video, being an audio interview or whatever. This was one of the best interviews I've done all year.